Hello there, Bourbon Real Talk listeners. Randy Sullivan coming to you today with some information that you might have been curious about if you're in the whiskey world, and that is barrel picks. So if you are involved in the whiskey world at all, you've probably come across barrel picks. And basically what that is, it's when either a restaurant or a bar or a retail store, and sometimes a group, goes out and selects a single barrel of whiskey, and that whiskey is bottled specifically for that entity, and it becomes this unique expression from whoever the producer is, and it's kind of an opportunity to do something fun, and it creates some camaraderie because, you know, you can only go to that one source to get it, and it's just become a really fun thing that we do in the whiskey world, especially as some of the more highly sought after whiskeys have become harder and harder to get your hands on. You can almost always find a really good barrel pick. And there's a lot of mystery surrounding around barrel picks, and as an administrator of a relatively large Facebook whiskey group, I have quite a bit of experience dealing with barrel picks. So I thought, hey, why don't we do a little educational piece, give you guys a peek behind the curtain so you kind of know what goes on and how all of that works. So the first thing that we want to talk about is which brands do barrel picks. Well, unfortunately, not all the brands that we wish did barrel picks. So barrel picks, typically the brand or the whiskey producer looks at barrel picks as an opportunity for them to get the word out about their brand. For them to create some special connections with the individuals that are seeking after those barrel picks. It'll maybe translate into them becoming a larger overall fan of the brand and maybe start buying their shelf products when they come out. As a result, brands that are extremely popular, many of them have stopped doing barrel picks. For instance, the most popular bourbon in the United States by demand is probably Pappy Van Winkle or anything from the Van Winkle line. And the Van Winkle line used to actually do barrel picks, but now there's absolutely no way that that would be a good use of their time. And other large producers who have become very popular and their special releases do well have also started to get rid of their barrel pick program. For instance, last year, I believe Knob Creek got rid of their barrel pick program, and now they have some special releases that are coming out that are specifically age stated. So the barrels that would have been in the barrel program are now going that direction. But the smaller the brand and the more desirous they are to get the word out about their brand, the more likely they are to be willing to do it. But it is an awful lot of work for the producer because typically they're batching together however many barrels go into one of their batches. Some are really small, like 20 barrels, some are 50, some are 200. I'm sure the big guys, some of them are 1,000 or more. And so it's a whole lot more effort to take that one barrel of whiskey and process it separate from everything else. And as a result of that, that's part of the reason why some of the barrel programs have gone away. It's just too much effort, and it's really not worth the producer's time to chase after it. And so who would get a barrel pick? Well, barrel picks either go out to some sort of a group or an entity. Sometimes it's a fundraiser event or whatever. Most of the ones that I seek out are barrel picks that have been selected by a Facebook whiskey group, like the group that I help admin, which is called Someone Say Whiskey. But there's lots of Facebook whiskey groups out there, and if you're not in one, you should probably check to see if there's, type in your local city name and whiskey and see what comes up, see if you can find them, or ask around the watering holes if anybody's in a whiskey club. But those are the ones that I seek after. But barrel picks are also sometimes done by a retail store who has a large customer base that likes to buy whiskey and they want to have a unique expression to sell them. Sometimes they're done by what they call on-premise, which would be a bar or a restaurant, or at least that's the perspective of the whiskey producer. Those are on-premise accounts. And there are some advantages and disadvantages for each one of these, and we're gonna talk about that as we go through it. So let's say that you want to get a barrel. Say you run a club or you're in a club and you're active and you want to get a barrel for your club. Who awards that barrel? Well, let's talk about the 3/4 tier system. So in the 3-tier system, you have the producer, and whoever the producer is has a license issued by the TTP called a DSP, a Distiller Special Permit, and they are allowed to make whiskey and they're allowed to use that permit to buy whiskey from other people. And once they have the whiskey, they can sell that by an individual barrel if they want to. The second tier is the wholesale level, And they're typically responsible for distribution of the products, and the producer may have a relationship with a different wholesaler in each state, and it could be an exclusive relationship, it could just be a one-off contract, it can work different ways. And then you've got the last leg, which is the retailer. And the retailer are just your local retail stores. And spirits in general have to, or alcohol in general in the United States, has to go through all three tiers every time. The question is there a fourth tier? And in some states, the wholesaler is allowed to sell product directly to bars and restaurants. And in some states, the bars and restaurants have to go to a retailer to get their product. So if the wholesaler sells to bars and restaurants, it's a three-tier state. If they have to go to a retailer, then it's a four-tier state. Here in Texas, we are a four-tier state. And so if you're asking who awards the barrel, the truth is that a barrel could technically be awarded to a whiskey club at any of those four tiers. You could contact a producer and convince a producer that you would be a great outlet for their whiskey and you're going to get them great exposure to your club members and all of that stuff. And the producer could decide, yes, we're going to give this person a barrel. Now, when you're talking about the larger producers, like the large Kentucky producers, the way that their barrel program typically works is at the beginning of the year, they earmark how many barrels they are going to put through their single barrel program that year. So say a larger producer like Four Roses, they may go, okay, well, 600 barrels are going to go out into the barrel program this year. And those barrels actually get broken up between barrels that are earmarked for retailers, because even if a club gets a barrel, it still has to go through a retailer. Or some of them are earmarked to go to bars and restaurants, what they call on-premise. And there may be separate accounting for those two different groups of barrels. So say 400 are going to retailers, 200 are going to bars and restaurants. And once they figure that out, they have brand reps in all the different states, and they have representation through their wholesaler, and they will tell the wholesaler, hey, of the 400 barrels nationwide, 40 barrels are going to the state of Texas. And the people on the ground know the accounts that they've been servicing, whether it be a retail account or it be an on-premise account, that have been doing a really good job of promoting the brand. And those are the people that they want to go to first to reward with a barrel. And you could, as a whiskey club, have that type of relationship with a brand rep, and that brand rep could decide, you know what, we're going to go ahead and give one of these to a whiskey club, and then the whiskey club then sometimes has the control to decide what retail stores it's going to go through. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So it could be done at the wholesale level. A retailer may have already been notified that they were receiving a barrel, or even a bar or a restaurant. And if they wanted to partner for marketing purposes with a whiskey group or club, that is their prerogative. And there actually can be a lot of benefit for bars and restaurants to partner with another, outlet that's going to get rid of some of the whiskey, because one of the problems associated with doing a single barrel program for a retailer or bar or restaurant is what happens if you've committed to buy, this $20-something thousand barrel, but it doesn't sell very fast. I mean, we as consumers don't understand that bars, restaurants, and retailers operate off of razor-thin margins, and if they make a mistake in their inventory and they take on too much inventory that they can't liquidate and move, that can be very financially dangerous for that bar or restaurant. And so what will sometimes happen is if the product's not moving, they don't order the whole barrel all at once when it comes into the wholesaler. So the wholesaler buys the whole barrel from the producer, and it's sitting in the warehouse. And then the retailer or the bar or the restaurant puts in their order and says, okay, there's a total of however many cases, say there's 30 cases of six, that's 180 bottles. I don't want all 30 cases right now, just send me 10. And then the other 20 cases are sitting there. Well, if it sits there for too long, that can have a negative impact on that retailer, bar, or restaurant's relationship with the wholesaler, because the wholesaler's carrying the inventory. And if they order all of it and it sits in the store, that can have a negative financial impact on that business. And so some of the time it makes sense to partner with a third party like a whiskey group to help move those bottles. and then you don't have to worry about being stuck with inventory. And so like a bar or restaurant may say, you know what, with our volume of sales, even if we make a cocktail with this or whatever, we're probably only going to need about 10 cases of the 30. And so the other 20 Facebook Whiskey Group, you guys market that and sell that to your members and get it out of the wholesaler's warehouse, and we'll do more barrels that way than we would if we just did the one and it took us a whole year or year and a half to get rid of it. Some of the time, the barrel pick sits in the warehouse for so long that the wholesaler gets upset and starts selling it to other bars, restaurants, and retailers. And that's where you end up in a weird situation where you walk into a retailer and there's a sticker on the bottle that actually has the logo of a competing store because that store didn't order their inventory fast enough. So as an example, and how could you even tell the difference between a store pick and a regular bottle? I mean, a lot of the times all the labeling is the same, and the only difference is either there's a neck tag or there's a little sticker on there, and it'll usually say something to the effect of hand selected by, or whatever, and then whoever did that particular barrel pick. And so that barrel pick could be awarded at any of those 4 levels, right? And so once you are notified that you're getting a barrel, what's the actual picking process? Well, that's the fun part, because that's where you get to drink the whiskey. My personal opinion, the best way to do it is to send a entourage of people that represent whoever is getting the barrel pick to the producer and actually taste the whiskey out of the barrels at the production facility. It can be an amazing experience. Usually they roll out the red carpet. Sometimes they provide lunch. It's a really great time. There's usually a private behind the scenes tour, and that's a great way. But in the age of COVID, social distancing, a lot of the distilleries aren't allowing people to come in, and then they mail out samples. And typically when you do a barrel pick, you're picking from somewhere between 3 and 6 different single barrels. And so you'll get 3 samples to 6 samples. Some of them have these really elaborate, beautiful boxes and all this stuff, and that stuff is all great. And then when you get it, you have to put together your tasting team. Everybody has to taste it and figure out, okay, which one of these barrels do we think is best and which one do we want to buy? Well, that actually creates problems for everybody in the food chain, because if you take too long to make your decision, what's happening with those other barrels, right? Because we talked about they may only earmark 600 barrels for the whole year, and there may only be 400 in this particular category for that's going through retailers. Well, if they send you 6 samples, there are 5 other barrels that they can't do anything with until they get your answer from you. And so if you ever get involved in a barrel pick situation, do not sit on your samples, okay? As soon as the samples get in, you've got to take action. The problem is that getting together a tasting team of 8, 10, 12 people sometimes takes a little bit of time to coordinate. And as we're going to talk later, we don't always have information about when those samples are coming in. We may be told that we're getting samples, but they have to go through the 3-tier system, and the tracking is terrible. And so they'll just call you one day and say, hey, the samples are in and we need an answer by tomorrow. And that makes things very difficult. So that's one of the hurdles that you have to get over. And then the last way that barrels get picked is sometimes they say, we're going to give you a barrel, but you have to let the distillery pick it for you. There's a lot of behind the scenes talk about whether or not that's how they get rid of the barrels that nobody else was willing to pick. Maybe they sit samples out of this barrel 3 or 4 times and no one ever picked it, and then you end up getting like the remnant barrels that no one else wants. There's a lot of discussion about whether or not the barrels that get awarded at the end of the year are the reject barrels that nobody else wanted. But I will say this, distilleries are pretty good about picking barrels that are exceptional compared to their average barrel. And so usually any barrel that's in the barrel program is probably going to be better than their regular shelf product, because the barrel wouldn't have made it into the barrel program if it wasn't. And so, I'm typically pretty happy. Sometimes they're super off profile, and that can get you some really weird results. But, if you're a whiskey nerd, sometimes you like a whiskey that's way off profile more than you do a really good whiskey that tastes like the shelf product, because you want to have a unique experience. So let's say that you are lucky enough to get a barrel pick through your whiskey club. What are some of the problems that you have to deal with as a club when you do barrel picks? Well, one thing that a lot of people don't think about is when you get samples, or whenever you're tasting out of a barrel, at the time that you're picking the whiskey, it's blind, right? You have no idea about that whiskey. Sometimes producers will tell you nothing about the whiskey. You don't know how old it is. You don't know what proof it is. You don't know any of that stuff, right? And that's actually one of the problems, because some producers believe that their barrel program could cannibalize sales from their regular product sales, and so they won't let you bottle the whiskey the way that you want. So maybe you're picking an Elijah Craig and you'd really love to do it barrel proof, but they're afraid that their Elijah Craig barrel proof sales will go down, and so they force you to bottle it at 94 proof. Elijah Craig does a good job and they proof their samples down, but there are some instances where you have to taste the whiskey at cask strength, but it's going to be bottled at a regular, shelf proof, and that can create some weirdness because you picked a barrel that you liked at cask strength, but watered down, maybe you don't like it as much. The other thing is that you have no idea how many bottles are in the barrel that you picked until way after the fact. A standard 53-gallon barrel will hold about 240 bottles, but almost all barrel programs are straight whiskeys that have been aging for at least 4 years, and you're going to have some evaporative loss, what most people call angel share. And so a typical barrel that's in a barrel program should yield between 160 and 180. Some of them are a little bit higher, depending on where they're aged or how long they're aged. But typically you're not getting more than 200, almost never more than 220, unless it's not a standard size barrel. And some of the times you pick one that you thought tasted really good, but it was a leaky barrel, okay? And when you thought you were gonna get 160 or 180 bottles, you're actually gonna end up with, 86. One time we got a 53-gallon barrel that had 86 bottles left in it. And that can be a surprise to you as a club. If you're a club and you've got really large membership and you find out that there's almost no bottles in the barrel that you picked, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. One of the other issues that we deal with is some of the easier picks to get are with smaller producers who maybe haven't done a single barrel before. And because of the way that whiskey is tracked through the 3-tier system, they have to create a new SKU for their first single barrel. So the first time they do a single barrel, they have to apply for a new label approval through TTB called a COLA, Certificate of Label Approval. And that can take a little bit of time, right? And then once they get their label approved, they have to have a new SKU, right? And there's got to be a new UPC that tracks different in the inventory system. Otherwise, they won't be able to tell the difference between their regular shelf product and the single barrel product. And then it's got to be added into the inventory system for the wholesaler. And sometimes that can cause a huge delay. And so we've had situations where we had no idea when a barrel was going to be available. One time we picked a barrel in December and it was supposed to be like a 2-month turnaround, and we ended up not seeing the barrel until I think July because of the problem with the certificate of label approval and the SKU. Another issue that we deal with is it's not uncommon for the producer to have a mix-up at the distillery and ship the wrong barrel. And sometimes you don't even figure that out until it shows up at the warehouse or at the retail level, and you go, nope, send it all back and start this process over. Sometimes they just lose barrels in the system, and that can cause delays, indefinite delays. One time I saw a barrel that got lost entirely, and the people had to repick and pick a new barrel. And that's something that, as a club member, you may have heard that a barrel's coming out and you're excited and you want to get your bottle, but, the club can't do anything about it. If the barrel gets lost, if they ship the wrong one, you're just kind of in trouble. Some of the times, bottles disappear at the wholesale level. And this is sometimes shocking to people, but most of the time when you pick a full barrel, they'll package that single barrel up and they kind of saran wrap the whole thing, and usually the barrel is with it and gets shipped off to the wholesaler. Well, imagine you're a wholesale worker and you work in this giant warehouse and there's just stacks and stacks of liquor everywhere, and you're trying to fulfill a customer order, and it says that you're supposed to get 3 cases of 1792 foolproof. And you're walking by and lo and behold, boom, there's a whole case of 1792 foolproof. And so you cut that cellophane and you pull those cases and you ship it off to that customer. Well, here's the problem. That customer was not supposed to be buying any of that single barrel because it was all earmarked for a particular bar, restaurant, or retail location. And so if you're a whiskey club, some of the time when your barrel gets delivered to the retailer, there's cases that are just missing. And that happened to us on our first 1792 foolproof drop. And those bottles turned up at a competing liquor store, and one of our members went in and bought them all. So that was nice, and they got put back into the food chain. So they ended up going back to the club members, and that was really good. Some of the time, if they don't lose the bottles, the retailer wants to hold back some bottles for their regular customers, especially if that barrel was awarded at the retail level and the retailer came to the club and said, hey, I want to partner with you on this. If it's a more rare barrel, like there was one retail store one time that got an OWA, well, it's no longer old, but a Weller Antique. Very popular barrel program bottle. Everybody wanted to buy a whole case of it, and there just wasn't enough to go around. What people didn't realize is that the retailer lost the rest of their Weller allocation for the year because they were awarded the barrel. The wholesaler was like, look, we're not sending you any more Weller Antique because you already got a whole barrel for yourself. We need to use this for the other stores that didn't get a barrel. Well, if you're the retail partner and you have regular customers that come see you because you occasionally have Weller Antique, you don't want to sell that whole barrel out to the club and not have any for your regular customers. So sometimes the retailer holds back some of the inventory for their own purposes, which they have a right to do. I mean, technically, it's their whiskey. They're the ones that are fronting the cost. One of the next problems that we deal with is if you're doing a single barrel, often you want to have what we refer to as a tater sticker. So it will look something like this, right? So this whiskey was from Litchfield Distillery in Connecticut, and it's got a very strong cinnamon component to it. And so we named this whiskey Cinnamon Roll Boy as a club. And that's usually what happens. You know, you're tasting the whiskey and everybody's getting the same tasting note. Sometimes it's a play on words with the name of the distillery. Like I've seen a lot of jokes on about New Riff Distillery releasing a single barrel, and you know, Ken Riffey Jr. and you know, things like that. Sometimes it's about something that happened on the trip when you were going to pick the whiskey. You had a car accident and they call it Crash Wagon or whatever it is. But regardless, if you're going to make it fun for the club and have this special sticker so that your club's advertised and all the club members get this, you know, special bottle, you got to hire a graphics designer to design that. And typically, graphics designers don't want to work for free, but retailers are not always so keen on cutting a check for the club's specific marketing. So you got to find a way to pay for the graphics designer. You also have to find a way to pay for the stickers to be printed, and the stickers can be kind of expensive. And so if you go back and look historically, each one of the barrel drops that I've been involved with Someone Say Whiskey have probably cost the admin team somewhere around $200 per drop, depending on how many bottles were in that drop. And there's really no way to pay for that. So that can be an issue. Another issue is labor to distribute or apply the stickers, right? And so depending on what level the barrel pick was issued, if you got the barrel pick at the producer or the wholesaler level as a club, we can go to any of our retail partners and say, hey, we're probably going to sell this barrel out the day that it hits your store. Do you mind if we send, 20 cases to your store in this city and then 20 cases to your store over here in this city? And they're like, oh yeah, absolutely, that's great. And that helps with distribution, and it helps the club members to easily be able to go out to the retail partner to get the bottle. But now you've got two locations that there's bottles that you got to get these tater stickers out to. You also have to find labor sometimes. So depending on how the bottle is configured, like for instance, this particular bottle, there was no place to apply the tater sticker without covering up some of the legally required information. And so this tater sticker had to be applied after the customer purchased the bottle. This bottle cannot be in a liquor store with the sticker on it already, because covering this up is not legal for the retail partner. But some of the time you have a bottle like this one that all of the information is on the front label and there is no back label, and there's plenty of space for you to put your tater sticker. In this case, you can go ahead and put together a team and get stickers on all the bottles. But if you've got, we had 2 barrels drop from Litchfield and there were 450 something bottles. If you got 450 bottles to put stickers on, at 4 different locations that are all about an hour apart from one another, that's a lot of labor to try to coordinate. One of the other problems that is kind of a COVID age problem that we started to deal with is social distancing. So if we're dropping a really popular bottle like a 1792 Full Proof or a Russell's Reserve or something like that, there's more demand in the club than there are bottles for sure. And if we do what we call a first come, first serve, where the majority of the bottles are at the retail store and whoever shows up first gets it, there's always a chance that we're going to send 500 people to a 2,000 square foot retail location that all want to walk in at 10 o'clock. That's not a good look. TABC doesn't like it when liquor stores are not worried about social distancing. And so that's caused a huge problem for these barrel programs, because when we go to the retail partner, we can't just go, hey, first come, first serve, because now the retail partner is at risk of getting in trouble with the licensing authority. And also that upsets club members that show up and they end up not getting a bottle. And so that's not good for anybody. So what we want to do is we want to find a way to identify who's going to be able to buy the bottle. And so if we do that as a club and we go, hey, retail partner, here's the list of people that are allowed to purchase this bottle. The retail partner doesn't want to do that. And that's because if we give them a list and these are the only people they can sell their inventory to, guess what happens when you haven't prepaid for a bottle? You don't go pay for it because it's not a priority. You don't have you don't have a dog in the hunt, if you will, right? And so the retail partners are like, no, because 20 or 30% of the people on this list are never going to come in, and I'm just going to be sitting here on this inventory, and I have customers coming in begging me to let them buy it, and I got to tell them no because their name's not on the list. I'm not doing that. And so we have had to, because of COVID and social distancing, start pre-selling some of the bottles where you pay into one bucket. We go in, we pay out of that bucket to the retail store, and then you can pick up your bottle at that retail store, or somebody can pick it up for you and you can pick it up from them or whatever. But that way we're social distancing, that way we're protecting the store, that way we're giving the store what they need, and they're not having to carry inventory that they weren't prepared to carry. So that's been a major issue. Now, once we get the bottles, and there's going to be a lot of members that say, "Hey, I can't make it to the store. Can you pick up my bottle and all that stuff?" We got to figure out. Well, actually, even before then, we have to figure out who's going to be allowed to buy the bottle. Okay, and this is a very difficult landscape to navigate, because in the whiskey world, we have what we call OG members, right? They're the original gangster members. And those are the people that have been around forever. They've been contributors. Everybody knows their name. Some of them are really well known for one thing or another, like maybe they're Dusties, or maybe everybody knows this person collects this particular brand of whiskey or whatever it is. When they have questions, they go to that person and that person answers. And a lot of the people in the whiskey world go, look, there's a limited number of bottles, and we feel like they should go to the OG members before the new people who just signed up in the club recently. There's a lot of people that say, no, the bottle should go to the people that are contributing the most to the club. And in the case of Facebook whiskey groups, Facebook actually has an algorithm and keeps track of not just the number of likes that someone gets or the number of comments that someone makes, but it's an algorithm that has a weighted value to all of that stuff, and it ranks your members as to who's contributing the most. And so then there's the people who are like, look, if you're going to have these bottles first come, first serve at the liquor store, I can't go on a Saturday, right? I work every Saturday, or I'm a first responder, or I'm on lockdown because somebody I knew got COVID and I'm not allowed to leave. How come I don't have a chance at a bottle? And so as a result, some whiskey clubs have had to come up with really elaborate barrel drop procedures to make sure that all of the constituent groups that have membership in their club are equally represented. So in the case of someone, say whiskey, we don't really worry about the OG members too much, because either they can show up at the store and get it at a first come, first serve, they can win in a randomizer, or if they really want to assure their spot, they can become a top contributor. And top contributors, meaning they're engaging with the membership the most, they're providing the content that is causing people to engage with their posts the most, And we set aside 10% of the bottle for our top contributors, and that usually includes most of the OG members in our club. And then we set aside 10% for people who can't make the drop because, whatever reason they're working, they're traveling for work. And in our case, we have members that live too far away from some of our retail stores. And so we set aside 10% for people who live more than 60 miles away from the retail store. And that way, everybody has an equal chance to be able to get one of our bottles. And so if you never really thought about it, there's a whole lot of effort that goes into getting these bottles out to club members. And if you're an aficionado and you've been chasing these bottles, I just want you, the next time you take a pour out of one of these amazing single barrel products, I want you to raise a glass to the people that work so hard to get that whiskey in your hands. Because if you never thought about it before, it is actually a whole lot of work. So, if you want more information about Bourbon Real Talk, you can find us at bourbonrealtalk.com. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram /Bourbon Real Talk. And we'd love it if you would subscribe, like, review, and comment on your favorite podcast player, as well as on YouTube. Even if you're not going to listen to the content every week, that's okay. You subscribing and listening from time to time helps the platform see that this is good content that they should be showing to other people based on key terms. So it'd help me if you did that. And as always, if you woke up this morning and you were unsure whether or not anyone loved you, just know that I love you, and I'll see you next time on Bourbon Real Talk. This content is being brought to you by the Bourbon Real Talk American Whiskey Aroma Kit. This is a tool that I put together to help all you whiskey aficionados out there develop your palates. You can sit down with the vials and train your senses, or you can sit down with a great dram and break that whiskey down to its components. If you have any interest in purchasing a kit of your own, head on over to bourbonrealtalk.com /shop and pick one up. Thank you for listening.